If you're a 90s or early 2000s kid, you probably spent your childhood watching Avatar: The Last Airbender, back in a time when TVs were square and bookstores weren't an endangered species yet. And if you never saw it when it originally aired, you might have seen it during its resurgence in 2020 when going to Walmart for toilet paper was like fighting in the Hunger Games. This show has had such a lasting impact on pop culture and the world of film because of its detailed world building, stunning visuals, powerful messages, unique story, sophisticated themes, and complex characters with compelling development. And it's this last part specifically that I want to analyze today, because it's through character development that Avatar: The Last Airbender created some of its most iconic and memorable characters, and also delivered some of its most impactful messages. Avatar: The Last Airbender is set in a fantastical world where people known as benders can manipulate or bend one of the four elements:
water, earth, fire, air.
Each element is associated with a unique culture and style of bending that evokes real-world Asian cultures and martial arts forms. The Avatar is the only one who can bend all four elements, and they use this power to maintain balance throughout the world. When the Avatar dies, they are reincarnated into a new body. The show's protagonist is the world's newest Avatar, and also the last Airbender, a 12-year-old boy named Aang. 100 years ago, the Fire Nation ignited a war to conquer the other nations, wiping out the air nomads to stop the Avatar from being reborn. Aang unknowingly eluded their ambush when he ran away from his home temple after learning he was the Avatar. Nearly drowning in a storm, Aang was triggered into the Avatar state, which gives him the knowledge and bending abilities of all the past Avatars. He instinctively sealed himself in an iceberg for protection, freezing himself in time deep beneath the ocean's surface. The war continued for 100 years before Aang was accidentally discovered in the South Pole by siblings Katara and Sokka. They learned that Fire Lord Ozai plans to win the 100-Year War by harnessing the celestial power of a comet and burning the entire world. The show follows Aang's journey as he masters the other three elements, so he can become a fully realized Avatar, defeat Fire Lord Ozai, and save the world. The show's creators, Dante DiMartino and Bryan Konietzko, stepped beyond gender norms when they made Avatar. They made both male and female characters strong, faulty, independent, and emotional. And some of the show's strongest, most formidable characters are girls. And characters that did fit within stereotypical gender roles eventually matured and broke free from them, showing that gender is not a rigid concept, but something that's fluid and ever-changing. What Avatar did that was so engaging and thought-provoking was it depicted characters actively working against learned behaviors, and we as the audience grow with them and internalize the lessons that they learn on screen. Konietzko and DiMartino were avid fans of Japanese anime. Just from the few intro clips, you can see where they drew inspiration from Asian media and culture with the written languages, the clothing, architecture, martial arts fighting, and the show's visual style. But one of the biggest things they drew from anime was a serial plot structure. Anime shows commonly use a singular overarching storyline from start to finish throughout the entire series. This promotes characters' emotional and psychological development. Meanwhile, many Western animated shows have short-term goals confined to a singular episode or season. Anime shows also don't shy away from addressing more mature themes or showing explicit content, whereas Western animation typically targets younger audiences. Though Avatar definitely has subplots and a handful of filler episodes, the ultimate series goal still takes precedent over all of the missions. They also prioritized emotional depth with the show's story and characters, as well as nuance in its messages and themes. And though this is an animated show that aired on Nickelodeon, Konietzko and DiMartino admitted that they didn't specifically make Avatar for children, meaning they weren't afraid to include some pretty heavy themes. So with long-term character goals and the willingness to address sophisticated subjects, Avatar had the foundation to portray characters who rejected gender norms and toxic masculinity in powerful and realistic ways. Prince Zuko is an iconic fan favorite from the show who is characterized by toxic masculine traits like aggression and violence and his incapacity for vulnerability or empathy. He's emotionally constipated and has severe anger management issues and could really do for some calming tea.
I don't need any calming tea! I need to capture the Avatar!
But by the end of the series, he realizes how harmful this behavior is to himself and those around him. And through many trials and tribulations, he expands his worldview and learns to adopt healthier traits. Aang directly contrasts with Zuko. He doesn't exhibit many typical masculine characteristics. Instead, he's goofy, silly, and kind of scrawny. He's an emotionally vulnerable, non-confrontational pacifist who mainly fights defensively rather than offensively. Konietzko and DiMartino established these characters as foils from the outset with effective character design, musical themes, and world building. One of the first things we see Aang doing is flying into a snow tower and playing with otter penguins, whereas Zuko is aggressively training and yelling at his uncle. Visually, Aang's clothing is soft and flowing, meant to complement his airbending, while Zuko's military armor is sharp, pointed metal, meant for intimidation. The vibrant yellow and orange air nomad colors clash with the dark blacks, grays, and deep reds of the Fire Nation. Their musical themes are also distinctive. One of the first songs to play for Aang contains a playful, airy flute and light, fast-paced percussion. In comparison, Zuko's song is dark, formidable, and slower. The creators also built a diverse world for the show, making distinct cultures for each of the 4 elemental nations. Aang was raised with the Air Nomads and Zuko in the Fire Nation. The Air Nomads were a pacifist people who were strictly against murder, even for the purpose of obtaining food, so they were all vegetarians and they also had no organized military. Their culture prioritized spirituality above material wealth and earthly attachments. Even their bending style reflected their peaceful ways, prioritizing defensive maneuvering over head-on attacks. The Fire Nation is a proud state that heavily values honor and strength. They have economic, industrial, and military prowess, and many Fire Lords have historically embraced expansionist and imperialist ideologies. Aang and Zuko embody opposing ideas of masculinity. Aang represents subversive traits for a male protagonist because he's a vegetable-eating pacifist who isn't ashamed of crying. Meanwhile, Zuko suffers from severe anger management issues. He falls in and out of toxic masculine stereotypes, whilst having at least a dozen identity crises along the way. He's a hot mess, but in a good way, because his mistakes make him realistic and show that change is not an easy or straightforward process. Together, Aang and Zuko promote a healthier, more inclusive model for masculinity and change. One thing that makes analyzing character arcs difficult, especially well-written ones, is that nearly every episode has something to add to the character. Unfortunately, it'd be too time-consuming to go episode by episode. So instead, I'm going to analyze recurring themes and symbols in the show that represent toxic masculinity and changes towards more positive models of gender expression. Since the 100-Year War, the Fire Nation has embraced ideals of merciless conquest and violence, and fire has become associated with power and destruction. Zuko's allegiance to his country aligns him with their toxic masculine ideologies. His relationship with the Fire Nation serves as an important marker for his development throughout the series. Episode 13 is one of the major instances where Zuko acts against the Fire Nation. When Admiral Zhao, Zuko's rival, captures Aang, Zuko dons his alter ego, the Blue Spirit, to rescue Aang so he can regain his own honor. In retaliation, Admiral Zhao tries killing Zuko by blowing up his ship. Zuko survives and eventually abandons his military uniform for simple white and gray clothes as a disguise. This is a significant visual separation from the Fire Nation, since the majority of Zuko's appearances so far have been in Fire Nation uniform. Another important part of his character arc is his relationship to firebending. Zuko uses his rage to fuel his bending, carelessly blasting fire without considering the destruction it causes. For him, firebending is a tool for power and violence, a way to expel all his pent-up anger. He was taught this at a young age from his abusive father, Fire Lord Ozai. Prior to the events of the series, Zuko dishonored Fire Lord Ozai by speaking against a Fire Nation general during a war meeting. To teach him respect, his father disfigured him and banished him, stripping him of his home and honor that can only be restored if Zuko captures the Avatar. The creators establish a connection between firebending and trauma for Zuko, and they visually symbolize it through his scar. There's an especially profound moment in episode 20 that portrays how deeply Zuko's trauma has affected him.
I've always had to struggle and fight, and that's made me strong. It's made me who I am.
Having Zuko turn his scar toward the camera when he says his struggles are what made him who he is, visually states that much of Zuko's aggressive and violent behaviors is a reaction from his trauma. His experience with firebending is that it is a tool for fear and dominance, hence why he utilizes it for violence against others in the show. While we look to Zuko's character for change, we look at Aang's for consistency, particularly with his moral principles regarding violence and the value of life. With these, he embodies a progressive representation of masculinity. In episode 16, Aang tricks Admiral Zhao into burning his own ships through taunting and evasive maneuvering. He completely avoids engaging violently with Zhao, but still manages to defeat him. Later in episode 20, Aang merges with the Ocean Spirit to stop a Fire Nation siege on the Northern Water Tribe. He waterbends a massive tidal wave that incapacitates the fleet, but doesn't completely decimate it. Aang also saves Zuko multiple times. During their escape from Admiral Zhao in episode 13, Zuko is knocked unconscious, but Aang saves him from being taken captive. Then in episode 20, Aang saves Zuko again when Katara nearly kills him because Zuko is an idiot firebender who thought he'd win a fight against a waterbending master in the middle of a blizzard. Ultimately, this season sets the foundation for major themes and symbols that recur throughout the rest of the show. Through his relationships with the Fire Nation and firebending, we see how Zuko is consumed by his toxic masculine traits. His eventual detachment from the Fire Nation and reconfiguration of firebending will represent his first steps towards change and independence. Meanwhile, Aang presents a new type of male protagonist. His consistency throughout the series establishes him as a positive model to emulate. Continuing the symbolism of Zuko's separation from the Fire Nation, Zuko and Iroh cut off their top knots, which are significant parts of their Fire Nation culture. After being declared traitors for opposing Admiral Zhao, they disguise themselves as non-bending Earth Kingdom civilians and seek asylum in the Earth Kingdom capital, Ba Sing Se. In this time of hiding, Zuko's perspective on firebending evolves. They meet a young woman named Song, who sympathizes with Zuko after seeing his scar. In an intimate moment when she shows him her own burn mark, he truly contemplates the harm that fire can inflict upon others. Later, he saves a young boy and his family from soldiers, but in doing so, reveals he's a firebender. Instead of thanking him, the boy and the villagers cower from him or outwardly despise him. Then, in Ba Sing Se, Zuko goes on a date with a girl named Jin. In a stupid and risky, but also romantic gesture, Zuko tells Jin to close her eyes, and he uses his firebending to light up all the lanterns in a courtyard, making Jin smile in awe. Through these interactions, Zuko learns about the destruction and pain firebending can cause others, and also that there's more uses for it than burning someone to a crisp. Episode 9 is a particularly important episode in regard to both Zuko and Aang's bending journeys. In this episode, Uncle Iroh teaches Zuko how to bend lightning, an incredibly advanced firebending technique that requires patience, precision, and control. During their lesson, Uncle Iroh describes the four nations and their respective elements.
It is important to draw wisdom from many different places. If we take it from only one place, it becomes rigid and stale. Understanding others, the other elements, and the other nations will help you become whole.
Zuko becomes quickly frustrated when he cannot immediately bend lightning, showing how his anger and impatience still hinders him even after the progress he has made. Meanwhile, Aang has difficulties learning earthbending, which is the elemental opposite of airbending. Earthbenders are more rooted and direct in their combat, facing opponents head-on rather than using evasive maneuvering or redirection. For Aang, a non-confrontational person, this is a difficult concept to grasp. However, by learning earthbending, Aang learns to be more assertive and defend himself. With his adoption of earthbending philosophies, he portrays masculine assertiveness without it being used for domination or control. Rather, it's framed as a way to set healthy boundaries in a constructive way.
In one of his journeys, Aang's beloved sky bison Appa is stolen. Eventually, Zuko finds out that Aang is in Ba Sing Se searching for his lost animal companion.
His obsession with capturing the Avatar had diminished since fleeing to the city, but it comes back in full force once the opportunity to restore his honor presents itself again. He returns to his blue spirit persona, intending to find Appa and use him as bait to draw out Aang. That is until Uncle Iroh tries to stop him. Their ensuing argument is a critical moment in Zuko's character arc, as Uncle Iroh poses some profound and thought-provoking questions that force Zuko to confront his most existential thoughts.
I know my own destiny, Uncle.
Is it your own destiny? Or is it a destiny someone else has tried to force on you?
Stop it, Uncle. I have to do this.
I'm begging you, Prince Zuko. It's time for you to look inward and begin asking yourself the big questions. Who are you? And what do you want?
As the camera moves left to capture the unscarred side of Zuko's face, it's visually emphasized that he must answer these questions for himself, not through the filter of his trauma or his father's wishes. In the end, he frees Appa. As the Blue Spirit, Zuko acted in ways that were inherently selfish, but also directly contradicted his primary goal of capturing Aang. The Blue Spirit is a physical manifestation of Zuko's cognitive dissonance. He doesn't really want to hurt Aang and capture him, he just wants his honor and his father's approval. At the end of the episode, Zuko drops the blue spirit mask into a lake. This is a powerful symbolic moment of him embracing the idea that he can determine his own destiny. But then Zuko spirals into an identity crisis that manifests into a raging fever that causes nightmares and nearly kills him because his body is repulsed at the idea of him actually doing something ethical. Uncle Iroh later explains that this illness was caused from Zuko's decision to free Appa.
It was in such conflict with your image of yourself that you are now at war within your own mind and body.
When he eventually recovers, he seems like an entirely different person. Optimistic, smiling, and enthusiastic about working in his uncle's tea shop, when previously he showed absolutely no interest in it. It seems as if Zuko has finally loosened his vice-like grip on his trauma and pent-up rage. But then, Zuko's sister Azula offers him his honor and a way home if he helps her take over Ba Sing Se. He accepts and joins her to attack Aang and Katara, and in moments, he unravels 2 entire seasons of progress. During the battle, Azula nearly kills Aang with a lightning bolt, but with the help of Uncle Iroh, Katara is able to save Aang and escape, though Uncle Iroh is taken prisoner. Zuko's progress is not linear. At first, he appeared to be growing past his old obsessions and behaviors, yet he reverted back to them within moments when the temptation arose. Meanwhile, Aang grows when he learns assertiveness, but he also realizes how anger can quickly take control of his actions and be harmful to others. This added complexity to both characters not only makes them more interesting to watch, but it also promotes the idea that, while change is possible, it is neither immediate nor easy. Since the second season, Zuko has reaffirmed his connection to the Fire Nation and assumed his title as Fire Prince. But despite achieving his goal of returning home and having his father restore his honor, he still feels discontent with his life. In episode 5, he confesses to his friends and sister that he's angrier than ever and he doesn't know what's right and wrong anymore. He's still plagued by an intense rage and confusion, even though he has everything he's yearned for since his banishment. This theme of internal conflict is expanded upon in episode 6, when Aang and Zuko learn 2 invaluable lessons that eventually decide their course of action in the final climactic episodes of the show. Fire Lord Ozai's grandfather, Sozin, was the one who initiated the 100-Year War with the genocide of the air nomads. Roku, who died before the war began, was the avatar who preceded Aang. He shows Aang his memories, revealing the events leading up to the war, in hopes that it'll give insight on how to end it. It's revealed that Sozin and Roku were best friends growing up. When Sozin was crowned Fire Lord, he wanted to work with Roku to expand the prosperity of the Fire Nation to the rest of the world, but Roku refused. Roku was the only one who could stop Sozin's plans, so when he died trying to save his village from a volcanic eruption, Sozin had the power to start the war. At first, Aang's friends believe the message behind the story is that the entire Fire Nation is naturally evil. However, Aang sees a completely different meaning.
Roku was just as much Fire Nation as Sozin was, right? If anything, their story proves anyone's capable of great good and great evil. Everyone, even the Fire Lord and the Fire Nation, have to be treated like they're worth giving a chance.
Meanwhile, Uncle Iroh reveals that Sozin and Roku are both Zuko's great-grandfathers. Zuko's ancestry serves as symbolism that corresponds to Roku's earlier message. Zuko realizes he's capable of both good and evil. However, it is his responsibility to determine which path he chooses. This revelation leads him to help Aang in the 100-Year War. He's finally learned that his goal of capturing the Avatar was not his own, but his father's. With this new self-determined goal, Zuko completes a massive component of his character arc. One thing that Zuko didn't consider when deciding he's going to help Aang is that maybe Aang and his group might not entirely trust him after Zuko spent the last few months shooting fire at them. To prove he's genuine about his change of heart, Zuko saves Aang and his friends from an assassin, risking his own life in the process. This convinces them that Zuko truly wants to help, and they allow him to join the group. For Aang, this is an important moment of forgiveness and open-mindedness. Again, despite all adversity, he's maintained his moral principles established since the beginning of the show. But when Zuko begins teaching Aang, he quickly realizes that he's lost his ability to firebend. Toph, Aang's earthbending master from Season 2, suggests that they seek help from the original firebending masters, the dragons. Ran and Shaw reveal to them the secrets of firebending, showing them that fire can be more than destruction and pain. It can be energy and life. This new approach to firebending restores Zuko's abilities. He's finally learned to control toxic masculine traits like aggression and violence instead of letting them drive him. Meanwhile, Aang still faces the moral quandary of how to defeat Fire Lord Ozai. With a climatic battle looming near, his friends tell him that killing Ozai is the only way to end the war. Though he knows he must stop him, he doesn't feel like he can actually take his life when the time comes. Yet if he doesn't, the whole world will burn. Conflicted, Aang calls upon 4 of his past lives seeking an alternative, but they also believe that murder is the only option. This goes against everything the monks taught him about pacifism and the value of life. Aang's loyalty to his moral principles throughout the show has been tested time and time again, and this is the ultimate trial. Despite all the battles he has fought in, he's always found a way to sustain life. But in this one, it seems like there's no other option. Except one. Aang defeats Firelord Ozai by taking his bending instead of his life. This unprecedented act saves the world and preserves Aang's values in an unexpected way. With Ozai defeated and stripped of his power, Zuko assumes the role of Firelord and officially declares an end to the 100-Year War. Together, they vow to rebuild and heal the world through a new era of love and peace. Through Zuko and Aang, Avatar: The Last Airbender is an incredibly subversive take on the portrayal of masculinity. While Zuko begins as a toxic masculine stereotype, the creators ensure that he does not benefit from those traits. He suffered because of his aggression and violence, and only when he learns vulnerability and empathy did he achieve happiness and inner peace. Taking control of his destiny, Zuko shows us that we are not bound to just one path. We can pave our own. We don't have to be just a product of our upbringings or our past mistakes. We can grow and become better. And while the road to change is not easy or simple, it is definitely possible. Aang teaches us forgiveness and open-mindedness, to be wise and empathetic, to be well-rounded and diverse in how we perceive the world. With these incredibly nuanced characters, this show is an important step toward a culture that prioritizes inclusivity over prescribed roles and expectations. A show like this creates ripples that influence change in its viewers, which honestly is the most any filmmaker can hope for. The socio-cultural impacts of the show are evident with the thousands of articles, memes, blog posts, cosplays, and video essays just like this one. The series is an inspiration to audiences and aspiring filmmakers, nearly 2 decades after its original airing. Of course, no singular television show, movie, book, painting, or any other creative work is going to single-handedly change a society. But that isn't the point. The point is to leave a lasting impression. And Avatar: The Last Airbender has done just that.